Vajiraman Ravi has been still there even during my mains preparation, during both my attempts 2023-24. I started my preparation in 2018 here as a foundation batch student, and finally I'm again back here 6 years later. The life has come full circle finally. I post-graduated actually in year 2018. After that I came to Vajiraman Ravi, as the name has always been there, where I was completely clueless कि क्या करना है क्या नहीं. And that year I think, but I think ये join किया test series मैंने, and we had those regular feedback sessions.
GS
we had GS. I was enrolled for the GS thing. I had that regular feedback session after every copy that was checked. We had those mentoring sessions going on. So उससे पता चलता था what is wrong, where I should add on, what is the changes I need to make, etc. So it went like that, and I really scored good in GS. Last year also it was 435 marks in GS 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rangamanju. I have secured All India Rank 24 in the recently concluded CSE 2024. I have secured a score of 132 approximately in my CSAT paper this year in prelims, and this was my 6th attempt at the examination, and this is an attempt to explain what may have led to a slightly inflated score in my CSAT paper. So about the strategy for CSAT, despite what I felt was an area of comfort for me, I ensured that I practiced CSAT on the regular. In my case, there was a weekly test series being held by a certain institution that I could access, which was near to my study center, and I would attempt the CSAT mocks from the month of January itself. Now, even in the past, I have not had any difficulty with the CSAT examination, but despite this, I thought it was required for us to practice CSAT well ahead of time and not just start somewhere in the month of March. Another element that I would like to speak of in my strategy about CSAT is that I did not ever think of the cutoff as 66. I always thought of that number as something that I have to attain, but didn't limit my number of attempts such that I would ever get just 66. I always thought of the total number of attempts that I should make as above 70. Of course, this is down to the comfort that I have with numbers, but in my opinion, anyone who limits the number of attempts such that they merely cross the 66 would potentially be leaving their fate at the hands of luck and chance. So, I have always felt that in order to secure a decent score in CSAT, not only must you practice from an earlier time period, but you must also ensure that the total number of attempts that you make are sufficiently high. I would put this number somewhere between 45 and 50 at the least. Now, the reason I say this is between the 3 parts of the CSAT paper, let's say we were to divide them into comprehension, logical reasoning and quantitative aptitude, I found that a majority of candidates now, they tend to think that they will get a good number of questions right in the comprehension leg of the paper. Now, I have found that despite all of my attempts at being as accurate as possible in the comprehension, I have never been able to secure an out of out. So, let us say in the last year's question paper there were 28 questions. On a good day, I would have been happy had I gotten 25 of them right, because the comprehension is vastly subjective and largely much more difficult to crack and say with certainty that this is definitively the answer. I never wanted to leave my score at the mercy of potential subjectivity. So, in addition to starting my paper with comprehension, I would then, and doing so within a limited time period of around 35 to 40 minutes, I would immediately shift my gaze towards logical reasoning and quantitative aptitude. Here, I would prioritize the questions that I thought I would get. Now, I had a rule in when I was attempting any mock paper, and this I carried forward in the final paper as well. In order for me to hit 70 out of 80 questions, what I did was ensure that if I could not arrive at an answer in logical reasoning or in quantitative aptitude within 2 minutes approximately of me starting the question, I would once again ask myself whether I can get the answer in 30 seconds. If the answer was a conclusive no, I would shift away from that question. And usually in quantitative aptitude questions, we find that once we break the rhythm and move away from the question, it is difficult for us to come back, because we will have broken that continuity in the thought process, and perhaps it would be difficult for us to get an answer. And this was a risk that I was willing to take as long as I can hit 70 plus questions. Now, there is another concerning trend that I have seen in the past few years, in that in 2018-2019 we could literally have walked into the examination hall and finished the paper with ease without necessarily any practice. And in the last few years, especially in the 2023 CSAT paper, I found that the paper was of a higher standard and higher quality, in that perhaps UPSC is starting to test the mettle of candidates and even use this as an eliminating paper. Now, because of the nature of this paper and the syllabus that we have, a lot of candidates make the mistake of not paying attention to some syllabus topics, probability and permutation combination being prominent among them. Now, most people believe that they can still ace the other questions from the rest of the paper. What I found was that in a paper like 2023, should it ever repeat itself, where there is an increased number of questions asked from probability and permutation and combination, if candidates are less prepared, they would find themselves in dire straits and possibly even make mistakes in questions from the first chapters, that is the number system chapter, because they realize that they do not have enough questions to deal with. So, this is why I believe in a risk diversification for the purpose of CSAT examination. We should not ever think that it is either just comprehension or just quantitative aptitude or logical reasoning that will get us that score. We must be sufficiently prepared and treat it like an actual paper. This would mean that give it sufficient due. For example, maybe an hour a day in the when you start preparing for GS and CSAT for prelims purpose, and not just towards the end of the examination cycle. Additionally, I think that given that the paper is changing, we may require more practice, sometimes on a daily basis. The source material that I used was Arun Sharma. He has a book on quantitative aptitude meant for the CAT examination. Now, there is a way I used this book in specific. There are 3 chapters in this book that are not pertinent to the UPSC CSE examination, which is the chapters on trigonometry, on coordinate geometry and mensuration. Now, having struck off these chapters, in the rest of the chapters, especially beginning with number system, I would solve all the level 1 questions and then move on to chapter 2 and 3 and so on. Having finished all the level 1 questions of the entire series, I would then come back to the level 2 questions. So, by the time I come back, it would be essentially a revision, and these level 2 questions are slightly higher grade. And I would never touch the level 3 questions in Arun Sharma, because I think they are a grade much above what is required for UPSC CSE examination. In this way, what I treated Arun Sharma was merely as a question bank, a place where I could keep practicing questions from. I found that if you practice enough questions on the regular, even for candidates who do not have a science background, and you may imagine when I gave the exam in 2019 or even in 2024 now, I have not really done math for a substantial period. In medicine, we do not have any mathematics at all. So, even for those who have arts and humanities as your course, should you practice sufficiently, even use the guidance of YouTube videos. Some of them cover some themes in a very simplistic manner, and I think we will find it easier to clear CSAT. It will not be the one paper that prevents us from attaining success in this examination. So, if I were to conclude this by quoting the top 3 tips in my opinion to ace the CSAT examination, it is primarily risk diversification, in that adequate due and equal importance must be given to both comprehension as well as logical reasoning and quantitative aptitude. Secondly, practice is key, and the more practice we get in, the less likely we are to make unenforced errors on the day of the final examination. And thirdly, I believe that for CSAT, time management is an absolute must. We must have a keen eye on the watch and ensure that we finish segments of the examination within appropriate time. So, on the count of comprehension, and given that it has approximately 28 out of 80 questions asked in a given year, I find that those who read the newspapers on a regular basis find it easier to get the right answer. Now, I had a certain trick that I used in my early attempts, which allowed me to increase my accuracy in comprehension. This was the 1/10 rule, that is the 1/10th rule. So, essentially what we do is we pick out a news article, it could be editorial as well, and suppose there are 1000 words in this editorial, we condense the learnings of this editorial into 100 words, that is to reduce it to 1/10 of its size. So, what this makes the brain do is to actively remove all of those segments in the news article that are not important or that are perhaps accessories and not the main point, and in this fashion we actually focus on what is the true motive and the true lesson that the article intends to convey to us. This concludes my inputs into the CSAT paper in the UPSC CSE examination.